Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Lens, presented by Jott-Nyx Paranormal. I am Jamie Widener. I'll be your host tonight, along with Chad Thomas, that guy, or that guy. He's on one of these sides. Chad, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, Jamie?
Oh, I'm exhausted. I'll tell you why in a second. Um,
Okay.
it has been a day, a long day, but a good day for that.
Mhm.
Um,
It's
I
Fat Tuesday.
It is Fat Tuesday. Yeah, that happens. It's happening still in the
Uh-huh.
world.
hmm
Uh, Took a little bit of advantage of it this morning. Had some carrot cake for breakfast because why not? I'm an adult. I can do what I want.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, and I also woke up in Western Ohio this morning too. So
yeah.
the
Those.
sprint home to get here on time was a good thing. We had a college visit yesterday for the oldest. In northern Columbus region, not Ohio State. Don't My state friends don't get on me. It's not that. But something that's about 3 miles away or so from their campus. But so far, so good. Great trip.
Good.
Fast. Went out Sunday, came back today. Visited yesterday. So a little tired, sir.
Yeah,
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 a
but
lot of miles.
probably not as tired as that student because they had
That's,
three
that's
three interviews in 4 days. So
that was true. Friday with a campus visit. Saturday with an interview for another
uh
college and university, and then a drive, and then another, and then a drive home. So yeah. Yeah, so it's been a whirlwind, but,
yeah,
hey, it is the season, right?
exactly, and they're all out of the way, so we're
Yep.
we're all happy about that.
Now the hard part, right? The
hmm
decisions. So
Exactly.
we'll
Um,
go
I
we'll go there when it's time. So
I got my
Ooh,
Fosnot today,
oh, good.
so.
Oh, it is that day, so
It is. My mom would have been proud. It was a true Fosnot, no sugar, no cinnamon, just the Fosnot.
perfect. That's the best ones, honestly. I've had many of in many ways, some are even cream filled.
hmm
But the glazed, of course, is fairly traditional around here. But just a straight donut. No more,
Uh-huh.
no more, no less. No powder, no anything. I agree with you. Is perfect.
So
So, well, good.
yeah,
Congratulations. Happy Fat Tuesday.
yeah.
So, which that is exactly why I chose to talk about New Orleans today with our episode. So, I think we should probably just get to it.
Yeah, why not?
Honestly, I've got a lot to talk about. So,
Okay.
it kept getting bigger and bigger as I researched more and more. So, but I want to, before we get too far there, I want to talk about what Fat Tuesday is about. So, um, first of all, today is Mardi Gras as well. So,
Mm,
Mardi Gras is a Christian holiday and a popular cultural phenomenon that dates back thousands of years to the pagan spring and fertility rites. Also known as Carnival or Carnival, it is celebrated in many countries around the world, mainly those with large Roman Catholic populations on the day before the religious season of Lent begins. So, come midnight, my time, if you were practicing, you would be giving up something, or many things for that matter, all the
mhm.
way through the Lent season until we come to Easter. So, um, that's the point of getting all of the stuff out. That
Right,
it would be temptation the rest of the
right.
way through Lent.
Okay.
So, Brazil, Venice, and New Orleans play host to some of the holiday's most famous public festivities, drawing thousands of tourists and revelers every year. Mardi is the French word for Tuesday, and Gras means fat. So in French, the days before Ash Wednesdays become known as Mardi Gras or Fat Tuesday.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Traditionally, in the days leading up to Lent, merrymakers would binge on all the rich, fatty foods meat, eggs, bread, lard, and cheese that remained in their homes in anticipation of several weeks of eating only fish and different kinds of fasting. So, um, lard is not what it used to be, I guess. I don't know about your household back in the day, but I was raised by my grandparents, and my
Uh-huh.
grandmother had a coffee can under the sink where every time we had bacon or anything else with grease, that whatever was left in the pan would go into that can,
hmm
solidify, and had a lid on it. Luckily, I guess, and it'd sit there until it was needed for something else, and there it goes back in the pan again. So I'm pretty sure that's not healthy or safe, but I'm
I
still here, so
Yeah.
I guess.
It was a big thing. Like that was like you could buy actually you can still buy them bacon
Okay.
like things to put bacon grease in to put in the refrigerator. So it's not that you keep them unrefrigerated under the sink like that. But yeah, there's a ceramic container that you put the bacon grease in and it solidifies in the refrigerator. And I mean, Jamie, like how are you supposed to make some things without bacon grease? Like,
Well, lard, hey, welcome to Southern cooking. First of all, lard is in everything.
mhm,
I have a Southern grandmother, so it makes sense. But today it's just with more, I guess, health consciousness.
mhm,
It just seems like a thing
yep.
that's kind of past, but apparently not. So okay, cool.
So
I know what you're getting for Christmas now. Um, so a quick fun fact too: in 1703, Mobile, Alabama, held the first Mardi Gras festivities here in North America. Um,
okay,
and has grown and expanded obviously ever since. So, but a purpose to say that is that Mobile, Alabama is very much like New Orleans, a Gulf state city, and
right,
some of this is culture that has come through from the French who traveled over and came through the Gulf states, as well as the Caribbean islanders coming up from there as well, and kind of mingling into North America from those areas. So
okay.
pretty cool.
Jamie, right before we go on, Bert says lard makes everything better. So Bert's
And that's everything with all caps as well.
uh,
I agree with that, Bert. I really do. I know. However, like I just, as I'm aging, I guess I have some kind of health consciousness about me that just says, "Oh, I shouldn't," but oh well,
yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
You know.
And Todd and Camilla are with us tonight too, so we want to say
So,
hi to both of
good
them
evening, guys.
and
Welcome,
everybody else out there watching. So.
of course. All right. So enough about Mardi Gras and Fat Tuesday. So let's talk about New Orleans, or NOLA, as it's also known, or if you're a local, Nolans,
Hmm.
because you know. So the history first. We always got to do the backstory. To understand why New Orleans is haunted, it's important to understand the history of the land. The area that became New Orleans formed around 2200 BC from the product of deposits from the Mississippi River. So a lot of silt and other left behind stuff. Discoveries by archaeologists surveying the area near Bayou St. John have found pottery shards, animal bones, and fragments of clay tobacco pipes from the woodland and Mississippian tribes from around 300 to 400 AD, showing this delta has been the home of Native Americans at least 1,300 years before John Baptiste Lemoyne, Sieur de Bienville, that's a long title, wow,
Hmm.
claimed the land for France in 1718. In 1762 and 1760, France signed treaties ceding Louisiana to Spain, and for 40 years, New Orleans was a Spanish city, trading heavily with Cuba and Mexico and adopting the Spanish racial rules that allowed for a class of free people of color. The city was ravaged by fires in 1788 and 1794 and rebuilt in brick with buildings and a cathedral that still stands today. So much of the old city is now gone, unfortunately, and we'll get to the fire in a little bit
Okay.
and the catastrophe that it really was. But most of the city was leveled.
Right. Can you go
And
back and say that name 5 times fast for Todd and Carmela?
I will not.
All right.
So, no, because I could barely say it one time slow. Um, John Baptiste Lemoyne Sieur, that's Sieur. My French is rusty, so it might be otherwise. De Bienville. So, but Jean Baptiste Lemoyne is his name. He is the Sieur de Bienville, as his title.
Okay.
So basically, he's the governor of the area, of the territory.
Got it.
So something we all should know, right? Because we all had history classes once upon a time. But in 1803, Louisiana reverted to the French, who then sold it to the United States 20 days later in something called the Louisiana Purchase. Maybe
Yeah.
heard of that before.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The final battle of the War of 1812 was fought in defense of New Orleans. Then Colonel Andrew Jackson led a coalition of pirates, formerly enslaved African Americans, and Tennessee volunteers to defeat a British force outside the city. What I love about that is pirates, Ted.
Mm-hmm.
Pirates, yes.
Pirates.
Not Pirates of the Caribbean per se, but still pirates. During the first half of the 19th century, New Orleans became the United States' wealthiest and third largest city. Its port shipped the produce of much of the nation's interior to the Caribbean, South America, and Europe. Thousands of enslaved people were sold in its markets, but its free black community thrived. Until 1830, the majority of its residents still spoke French. At the start of the Civil War, New Orleans was the largest city in the Confederacy, but it was only a year until Union troops, having captured its downriver defenses, took the city unopposed. During the Reconstruction era, race became a potent political force as emancipated enslaved people and free people of color were brought into the political process. And with the 1870s rise of the White League and the Ku Klux Klan, forced back out of it. Although the rise of railroads made shipping on the Mississippi less essential as that it had been, New Orleans remained a powerful and influential port. By 1900, the city's streetcars were electrified and New Orleans jazz was born in its clubs and dance halls. The city grew. New pump technology drove the ambitious draining of the low-lying swampland located between the city's Riverside Crescent and Lake Pontchartrain. New levees and drainage canals meant that many residents could live below sea level. Hurricanes in 1909, 1915, 1947, and 1965 damaged the city, but never catastrophically. After World War II, suburbanization and conflicts over school integration drew many white residents out of the city, leaving a core that was increasingly African American and impoverished. Despite these social changes, the city grew as a tourist attraction, with hundreds of thousands of annual visitors drawn to its Mardi Gras festivities and to the culture that had inspired playwright Tennessee Williams, trumpeter Louis Armstrong, and chef Jean Galatare. On August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck and haphazardly evacuated New Orleans. Upon landfall, the Category 3 storms force winds tore away roofs and drove large storm surge that breached 4 levees, flooding 80% of the city. Hundreds were killed in the flooding, and thousands were trapped for days in harsh circumstances before state and federal rescuers could reach them. Officially, 1,392 people died in New Orleans because of Katrina.
Wow.
Now, Chad, I will tell you this. I was in Gulfport, Mississippi 2 days before Katrina. I was there for almost 3 weeks prior to it with a project that was for work.
Mm-hmm.
And as I left, and luckily my project was done, I wasn't evacuated per se, but I was already leaving. As I watched the news and all of this unfold 2 days later, 3 days later, the places that I knew were literally wiped off the map.
Wow.
It was such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that far behind us now, 20 years, but still, the recovery in some areas is still slow
Right.
and still happening. And some folks who left never came back.
Hmm.
So a lot of stuff, right? A
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of history, some transitional things, some issues with just multicultural things. So it's a really cool place, first of all. And I've had the pleasure of being to New Orleans. I had
Mm-hmm.
the pleasure of being there on my birthday one year. And I also had the supreme pleasure of being on Bourbon Street on my birthday. Uh,
Okay.
I'll try to tell you what I remember that later. Um, but what I didn't get to do while I was there was exploring the haunts. So,
Okay.
unfortunately, but let's talk about them now. So, a couple things, many things actually, but a couple things, the bigger things to start with. There was a yellow fever epidemic in New Orleans between 1817 and 1905. There were actually several. Perhaps the most gruesome tableaus ever to unfold in New Orleans took place during yellow fever epidemics, which peaked in 1853, where there were 7,849 deaths, in 1858, when there were 4,845 deaths, and in 1778, I apologize, for 4,046 deaths. Over 41,000 would lose their lives to yellow fever in the 19th and 20th centuries totaled.
Wow.
There's a good reason for this. Interestingly, the mosquito-borne virus, a member of the Flaviviridae family, and that's another one I'm not going to say 5 times fast, ravaged the populations of immigrants new to the city in particular. Individuals became infected when bitten by a mosquito carrying the virus, so it was easy for multiple members of a household to succumb to the disease. Headaches, muscle soreness, fever, and jaundice, hence the name yellow fever, were followed by liver and kidney failure, hemorrhaging, seizures, coma, and then death. Yellow fever cases peaked during warmer months when mosquitoes were most active, and for years, families who had the means to flee during the summer did so. During the worst epidemics, 1 out of every 10 people who stayed behind would die.
Wow.
In 1853, more than 1,000 people died a week. Obviously, civil services were not equipped to deal with these mass deaths of that magnitude, but what they did what they could. Each day, corpse wagons circled the neighborhoods, drivers calling out, "Bring out your dead!" Mass graves lined the city's perimeter. Fortunately, the 20th century scientists figured out that if they controlled mosquito populations by limiting their breeding grounds, they can control the spread of the disease. New Orleans joined forces to close their cistern, drain stagnant pools, and create underground sewage systems. After 1905, yellow fever never again ravaged the Crescent City, but it still exists in other underdeveloped parts of the world. So, a big deal. 41,000 people.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And how many years that was?
It was mostly during the 1800s, so in a window between 1817 and through 1905, once some true renovations and incorporation of better hygiene tactics like closing the cistern,
Right.
and then getting just drainage, getting rid of stale water, setting water, really helped
Right.
remove the mosquito populations. Of course, too, like awareness, public awareness too, like what to do. So let's talk about some places.
Okay.
So the first is the Lalare Mansion. The Lalaurie House is well known both within and beyond New Orleans city limits. Kathy Bates portrayed Delphine Lalaurie in an episode of American Horror Story, and the haunted house attractions frequently includes homages to the grisly tale. Lalaurie enslaved African American people, and she was a notoriously cruel mistress. After a 12-year-old girl fled Lalaurie's bullwhip in terror, falling off the roof and dying from her injuries, the authorities were brought in to investigate. Because cruel treatment to slaves was prohibited by law, the Laurie slaves were taken away from the house and sold at auction. Unfortunately, one of Laurie's friends bought them and gave them back to her.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Whether whether Laurie's famous temper led her to act out in vengeance toward the slaves or whether she was simply insane, no one knows, but the worst was yet to come. Visitors to the Laurie house became fewer and fewer as rumors of her cruelty spread and damaged her reputation. In 1834, a cook intentionally set fire on the house, hoping that it would bring civic intervention at best, or the relief of death at worst. Behind a locked door on the third floor, firemen discovered a scene described in the New Orleans Bee on April 11th of 1834. This is direct from the news. 7 slaves, more or less horribly mutilated, were seen suspended by the neck, with their limbs apparently stretched and torn from one extremity to the other. These slaves had been confined by the woman Lalaurie for several months in the situation from which they had thus providentially been rescued. They had been merely kept in existence to prolong their suffering. End quote.
Hmm.
Subsequent retellings of the story include even more perverse and graphic forms of torture, but the B account is the most reliable version. The Laurie managed to escape, and an angry mob destroyed her home's interior, smashing furniture and ripping out doors and railings before order was restored. The gutted house sat for several years and eventually returned to the market. It was purchased by actor Nicolas Cage in 2007 and sold again in 2008. Word on the street is he never dared spend the night there.
Okay.
So the next is called A Midnight Shrine.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Was and maybe you'll hit this. Was one of the Haunted Mansion movies about that house or not?
It's not that house per
Okay.
se, but it's an incorporation of a few things.
Because I feel like that story was part
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, the Walt Disneyland house is a New Orleans
Right.
mansion plantation. So yes and no to that degree. It's not exact though. It's not a true carry. Probably because it's too gruesome for that
Right.
matter.
Yep. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
That was great. And I see that Todd and Carmela have New Orleans on their list of visits in the future. Let me know.
Yeah.
Perhaps road trip. Call it now, or air trip, then a road trip.
And then we'll have to eat lard while we're on the trip.
It's all about the lard. Yeah.
So
This is a bit of a story, but another point. I moved on an insufferably hot August day to one of the oldest houses on Esplanade Avenue, built in 1831. I rented the large upstairs apartment, which was flanked by 2 smaller rear units. On my second day, a back tenant was moving out. "We can't handle the ghosts," she said. "It's horrible." I never caught her name as she took off with the last box. I chalked it up to strange neighbors, that is, until things began happening in my own place. In the middle of the night, a golf ball rolled down the hallway. Well, we don't golf, so it was unusual. The chandelier bulbs began dramatically sparking, going dead. One particular battery operated cat toy ended up activated, rolling around the living room, despite being stored in a closed box in a guest room closet. That sound familiar? Something we might have?
Mm-hmm.
hmm Halloween 2019 arrived, and my friend RJ flew in from New York. We decorated black lacquer skulls, purple fairy lights, plastic ghouls, and faux spider webs. From our hangovers the following morning, we marked we marked the first big party a success. Threw all the decorations in an unorganized pile on the table and sourced last-minute Andy DeFranco tickets. Because why not, right?
Right.
We returned just after midnight. I collided with RJ's back as he stopped dead. Every Halloween decoration was placed carefully and deliberately on the table. A shrine made of Party City kitsch was encased in plugged-in fairy lights. Four big skulls faced us, grinning. The effect was awful. I considered and loudly discussed moving out that very night. Instead, we unplugged the shrine, threw everything in storage boxes, and tried to sleep. 3 years on, with the help of the historic New Orleans collection, I've discovered our ghost is Jules Hughes de la Verne. Born in 1818, he lived in the house and raised his children there. In a strange twist of fate, or perhaps not, I became friends with his descendants who reside in the Garden District. He loved his house, they told me one night, drinking wine in the living room, which was once his bedroom. Now I regularly leave a shot of his preferred rum on the mantel, and he dutifully continues to toss golf balls down our hallway at 3 a.m. It's from Jenny Adams, a Gun and Garden contributor.
Okay.
Another story. This one is A Grandmother Returns. I remember the story vividly. I was in the seventh grade, and the house was on Cardonellet Street. It was built in the 1870s, and my mother's mother and family lived there before us. I had a friend over to spend the night, and it was probably around 10 p.m. We were up giggling, doing what girls do, when we heard heels coming down the hallway. It was at a Center Hall cottage. The space was backlit. I could see a woman. It was my grandmother Nellie. We waited, pretending we were asleep, because that's what kids do when they're up goofing off,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. The footsteps stopped, and my grandmother disappeared. Alarmed and confused, I yelled out, "Mom, is Nellie here?" It wouldn't have been weird to see my grandmother who lived over on Jefferson Avenue. My mom yelled back, "No, go to sleep." My friend was really upset, but we finally fell asleep. I learned the next morning that my mom was about 17. My grandmother Nellie brought her mother Carnella and McDevitt home to this Cardinalette Street house because her health was failing. She was born in 1870 and died about 1948. She lived her last year in that bedroom we were sleeping in. Cornelia looked like my grandmother, but with hair that was pulled back in a bun. I saw her, the heels, the dress, the whole thing. This is from Andrea St. Paul Bland. This is what I love a lot. It's called Trapped in the Chimney. The house was built in 1836 in the Marigny, and I loved it the minute I walked in. I put an offer the same day. Then I went home and Googled it. It turns out it's one of the most haunted houses in America. Is it too late to rescind your offer at that point? I mean,
Yeah.
eh, yeah. All right. The Travel Channel did an episode on it. The house was terrible, about a woman hanging her dog and then herself. However, I'm a public health professor and I'm not easily spooked. I'm more apt to look for scientific explanations. I like this fellow. I moved in and was told that someone who lived there before me was a spiritualist. Apparently, he did some ceremony to try and trap the ghost in the chimney. I opened the flue, and that's when things started happening. Why would you open the flue? I mean, my cleaner felt a hand on her cheek. This one window wouldn't stay closed. I put a curtain rod there to keep it shut. The next day, I found the curtain rod bent lying in the yard. People who worked in the house say they saw someone in the hallway. And the worst thing is, I sometimes hear a dog whining and scratching. I hear it coming from the chimney. I have friends who won't even come to the house. This is by Lorelei Cropley.
Huh.
This one also is very good. Yeah, right, dude. Why
Why
would you
why
open
is a
it?
dog stuck in the chimney?
Because well, that's the beginning of the story. It's
Right.
the why people are crazy. All right, the next one is called A Servant's Staircase. In the fall of 2015, my parents began renting the studio apartment at the Pontabella building. It was a fourth floor walk up attic unit. It was amazing. You could open the windows and hear live jazz. You felt like you were in the midst of everything going on in Jackson Square. When the Pontabella was first built, every unit had two staircases, a formal staircase and one for servants. At some point, they all cut the units in half. Our unit used to be, our unit would have, excuse me, let me start that over. Our unit used what would have been the servant staircase for access. I remember it was 77 steps up with no air conditioning. You don't forget a thing like that,
No.
especially in New Orleans. The stairs got narrow and narrow as you went up until it was barely one person wide. Sometimes you'd be walking up and it was suddenly freezing, not cooling you down, more like shivers going up your spine freezing. We investigated and found out there was a young woman who was hired as a night nurse. The baby was fussy, and in the middle of the night, she would walk the stairs with it. As the legend goes, she got tired and tripped and fell. She saved the child's life with her own. Residents believe she now walks up and down the servant staircase forever. This is from Taylor Barron.
So good residual haunting there, huh?
Absolutely. All right, next one is called Odd Feelings. We own an 1850s townhouse right off Magazine Street. The house is often chosen as a set for films, and producers sometimes stay while they work. Back in the 1800s, the Odd Fellows were the super powerful secret men's society similar to the Freemasons or the Illuminati. This house was once their satellite lodge where they performed rituals. As a friend and I were restoring it, there was a section of flooring that didn't match. We popped the floor open and there was a really old velvet lined coffin shaped thing. I thought at first that maybe someone kept guns in it, but then I realized it was part of these weird Odd Fellows rituals. This house was a spiritual place of worship for a long time. I mention that because there is a thing that happens here. People hear their names called out at night. When it happened to me recently, I was asleep on the sofa. I very clearly heard my name, Banks. It sounded like my wife's voice, and it sounded perturbed. I opened my eyes and I didn't see her. I called out for her in the darkness, but got no response. So I got up, walked into the bedroom, and there she was, sound asleep. It's happened to so many people now, including my parents. People think they've dreamed it, but when there are just too many of us that we've heard our names called, the only way to find out is to check. So this was written by Banks McClintock. He's an architect.
Okay.
So there's places like this, like stories of these residences, and there are so many of them. That I'm gonna kind of go through a lot of stuff here, but more of them, not necessarily detailed stories, but just locations and activities.
Okay.
So the first is Muriel's Jackson Square. After losing the house at a poker game, Pierre Antoine Leparde Jordan committed suicide upstairs in 1814. His ghost doesn't appear human, but has a glimmer of sparkly light. There's even a seance room where guests can visit that honors Jordan's spirit. The Le Petit Theatre. Here you might bump into an actress from the 1930s named Caroline who accidentally tumbled over the railing to her death in the courtyard below, dressed in a white wedding gown for the play that night. You might also run into the captain who watches plays from his balcony seat, hoping for a glimpse of an actress he was sweet on. Next is Père Antoine's Alley. Père Antoine was a beloved priest who worked tirelessly for the poor. Visitors to the alley that runs alongside St. Louis Cardinal Cathedral say that you can see Père Antoine's ghost in the early morning hours, clad in a capuchin, black, and sandals. He's also seen inside the cathedral walking the aisles. The Old French Opera House. This site is said to be haunted by Marguerite, the ghost of an aging Storyville madam. Spurned by her young lover, she committed suicide more than 100 years ago after leaving a note that read, "I will return and kill those who have hurt me." Okay. Next, the Mahogany Jazz Hall. Many of the staff who work here have had run ins with its resident ghosts. They have felt phantom hand touches, heard disembodied whispers, and witnessed unexplainable shadows walking throughout the club. Faulkner House Books, another location. William Faulkner wrote his first novel while staying in this house in the 1920s. People swear they've seen his ghost sitting at the writing desk and say you can smell his pipe still.
Okay.
The Ursuline Convent. In the 1700s, the Catholic diocese sent young girls from the French convents to New Orleans to find husbands. They carried their belongings in coffin shaped chests and became known as the casket girls. Some say the caskets really held vampires from the old country.
That's how you repopulate, right? You send them over to a
Why
new.
not? The St. Louis Cathedral. St. Louis Cathedral is believed to be haunted by Père Dagobert, pastor of the St. Louis Cathedral in the mid 1700s. After worship, people have seen Dagobert's spirit walking with his head lowered throughout the aisles. The old Absinthe House. This 200-year-old bar is haunted by famous customers who used to imbibe here. You might pull up a stool next to General Andrew Jackson, Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau, or the pirate John Lafitte himself. Doors open and close on their own, while bottles, glasses, and chairs have been seen moving throughout the bar. The Bourbon New Orleans. The Bourbon Orleans was home to the famous quadroon balls. Today, a lonely ghost can be seen dancing beneath a crystal chandelier. The hotel is also home to a ghost nun who slapped a man working on a stairwell for swearing. Antone's Restaurant. It's said that Antone Alciatar was the founder of a famous family-owned restaurant, returns to check up on his ancestors. Other spirits in the 19th century clothing appear from mirrors in the washrooms. So you're never alone.
No.
The Herman Grima House. Built in 1831 for prosperous Creoles, this house is said to be alive with pleasant, friendly southern ghosts who scatter scented rose and lavender around the rooms and light the fireplaces to make it cozy. My kind of people right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The Napoleon House. This now eatery and bar has had a few different roles since it was built around 1800, which has led to a variety of different specters haunting the sites. Because it served as a hospital during the Civil War, the ghost of a Confederate soldier can be spotted walking the second floor balcony. Other common ghostly phenomena are from the 20th century: the figure of a little old lady sweeping the balcony, and the mysterious reappearance of glasses on the bar once everything has been cleaned and put away for the night. The Marie Laveau House. Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau lived on the site between 1839 and 1895. Her spirit is said to conduct wild voodoo ceremonies there still today. The Hotel Mont de Leon. A stay in a Hotel Mont de Leon comes with a dose of haunted history. Legend has it the 14th floor, which is actually the 13th because they skipped it numerically, of Hotel Mont de Leon, is home to paranormal activity. Guests have reported hearing the footsteps of Maurice Berger, a young ghost child who haunts the hotel. Apparently, he is seen throughout the building. The Louisiana Supreme Court Building. You may recognize this terracotta and marble structure from the runaway jury. For those who live in New Orleans, they recognize the Louisiana Supreme Court Building as one of the most haunted locations in the city. From a ghostly lawyer who roams the halls to employees who hear the eerie shoe tapping, even when no one is there, the Louisiana Supreme Court Building's ghost stories are tied into the disappointment, violence, and neglect that has inhabited the structure since its founding. The New Orleans Pharmacy Museum. One of the ghosts of the Pharmacy Museum is said to be Dr. Dupas. According to legend, Dupas imposed shocking experiments on pregnant slaves, and other people have stated that he performed voodoo rites within the property itself as well. Today, it is said that Dr. Dupas's ghost haunts the Pharmacy Museum after it closes. His ghost is seen wearing a brown suit and oftentimes a matching brown top hat too. His ghost appears to be of a man in his mid-60s. He is said to be short and stocky with a mustache. His spirit is said to be responsible for throwing books, moving items that are on the display in the museum, and triggering the alarm system, even in the dead of night. The Andrew Jackson Hotel. The ghosts, plural, at the Andrew Jackson Hotel are some of the more interactive specters encountered in the city. Back during the building's tenure as a boys' boarding school, 5 students died in a fire, but they have been spent their afterlives playing and causing a bit of childlike mischief, and their laughter and footsteps are often heard throughout the hotel and courtyard. The spirits of the boys, along with one believed to be a former housekeeper, will move personal items and furniture around guests' rooms. The boys hiding items as a joke, and the housekeeper fluffing pillows and straightening towels.
Hmm.
The Sultan's Palace. The Garnier Le Petre house, also known as the Sultan's Palace, was leased by the brother of a Turkish sultan in the late 1790s. One stormy night, assassins brutally murdered everyone they found in the house. Ghostly forms have been seen there for many years since. Le Pavillon Hotel. In the mood for a PB&J? Stop by on the La Pavillon Hotel, and you won't even have to book a room. But PB&Js are not the only thing that La Pavillon Hotel is famous for. This Belle of New Orleans is one of the city's most haunted hotels. One story relayed to Ghost City, which is a very much a active organization that does paranormal investigations throughout the city, occurred one night when a couple, their names are Kim and Cy, decided to stay at the hotel. Cy worked offshore, so whenever he came back in, he and Kim would pick a different hotel to stay at. Their night at the La Pavillon turned out to be an interesting one, to say the least. It's important to mention that Cy is about 6'5", Cajun, and he once competed in MMA. So he's not the kind that scares easily.
Right.
So they say. Kim and Cy just retired to bed when Cy started to feel something touching the bottom of his feet. He looked up and around, but didn't see anything. Slowly, he then started to feel the sheets tugging off of him. He began to panic when he felt a pressure push down on his chest, as if someone were trying to hold him down. And despite being 6'5", Cy couldn't lift the force off of him. He could barely breathe. He actually started to think he was having a heart attack. Cy claims the experience lasts for 5 to 6 minutes.
Wow.
Now, if you remember, we talked about Harper's Ferry, the Hilltop House there has reports of the same kind of activity where someone in the middle of the night, you would have that pressure pressing
Right.
down, men specifically would have that pressure holding them down. It's
Mhm.
a interesting thing. I'm sure it's happened in others as well. We'll probably have to look into that a little bit more.
Yep, I'm sure. I just want to say hi to Frankie who just jumped in.
Hey, Frankie, good evening. So New Orleans is famous for a lot of buildings, but one of the things that's really really well known for too are the cemeteries, and there are quite a few. So,
Hmm.
Lafayette Cemetery number one. Lafayette is one of the oldest city-operated cemeteries in New Orleans and can be found in the Garden District. Famous vampire author Anne Rice immortalized the cemetery as she made it into the final resting place for the Mayfair witches. But Lafayette is also one of the few non-segregated, non-denominational cemeteries in New Orleans. In the length of one city block, there are around 1,100 family tombs and over 7,000 souls that call Lafayette home. Amongst those souls are Americans from 26 different states and immigrants from over 25 different countries, creating quite an afterlife melting pot. The St. Vincent de Paul Cemetery. De Paul is another notable cemetery, sometimes referred to as Louisiana Street Cemetery. The cemetery is believed to be founded by a priest and was once owned by an infamous duelist, Senor Jose Pepe Lulala. Two of the cemetery's most famous residents are the spiritual leader Mother Catherine Seals and a gypsy queen named Marie. St. Roch Cemeteries number 1 and number 2. St. Roch has a reputation for being one of the most unusual cemeteries in New Orleans, which is saying quite a lot. Despite the unique title, St. Roch is one of the least visited cemeteries in New Orleans, which might just be the reason why the ghosts enjoy chilling in this historic cemetery so much. For nearly a century, ghost stories have emerged from St. Roch. One of these such stories is about the hooded ghost of the St. Roch Cemetery. The hooded figure can sometimes be seen walking through the cemetery's pathways and leaving right through the walls that surround it. Another tale is of a ghost dog, which is often seen roaming the cemetery. He is typically described as a unnaturally large black dog. His ghostly image has been captured in pictures and on video, and visitors believing that the dog is a stray have followed him through the cemetery, but just as they're about to corner him, the dog vanishes. Chad, coincidentally, or maybe not, St. Roch is the patron saint of dogs.
Okay.
Coincidence?
Yeah. That makes
Maybe.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of stuff, right? So, to conclude it, why is New Orleans so haunted? A couple things. First, the violent start, right?
Mhm.
Going back through history. In 1718, city founder John Baptiste Lemoyne, Sierra de Bienville, said it again, so maybe 3 more times fast and I'll have enough, sailed down the Mississippi River and settled in New Orleans. He was accompanied by soldiers and expeditioners from Canada and France, but Bienville realized early on that he needed people to grow the city's population. So he did what anyone might do. He penned the King of France and requested that the crown send some folks across the Atlantic. The king acquiesced, but he did so on his own terms. In 1721, he opened all of the prison doors of Paris and put them on a ship heading to New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
The convicts were the lowest of society: thieves, pickpockets, rapists, and murderers. Then Bienville needed appropriate brides for all his colonists, and the first group of prospective women recruited hailed from Paris's House of Correction. Yeah, they were prostitutes, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
The early colony of New Orleans struggled under the weight of debauchery and crime, where bursts of violence were not uncommon. Those same convicts repeatedly began to fill the original jail called Old Parish Prison. But even after they were publicly executed for their crimes, their souls never left the prison. Other prisoners heard disembodied screams from all areas of the jail that no one was in. The sounds of iron clanking woke them every night. Guards began reporting that they saw shadows of ghostly figures roaming the cells and corridors, and some grew so frightened by the dead convicts, which they feared more than the living ones, that they up and quit. When the parish prison closed, it still had 350 prisoners locked inside. It's fair to say that the ghosts of those early colonists, especially those who ended up in prison before facing their execution, have opted never to leave the city and found themselves in centuries ago. Second reason, the American Plague. It arrived in the form of infected mosquitoes, but resulted in the deaths of thousands of people. Yellow fever was the true killer of New Orleanians. That's a weird word. During the 18th and 19th centuries, after drinking the diseased water, people's temperature spiked, and their liver infested with the fever shut down. Skin burned a sickly yellow, and the whites of their eyes matched the jaundiced flesh to perfection. It was only a matter of days until the body could no longer support itself and succumb to the disease. With no known cure, gravediggers could only collect the dead off the streets and haul them to the cemeteries, most of the bodies at any rate. To this day, locations in the French Quarter swear to be haunted by the ghosts of yellow fever victims, many of which were children.
Right.
And next, cities of the dead. Mark Twain once called the cemeteries of New Orleans the cities of the dead, and the nickname has stuck for over a century. Due to a Spanish and Roman Catholic influence, the colonists of New Orleans did not bury bodies 6 feet under. The high water table was unforgivable, for one, and very thought of coffins bobbling up from underground with remains popping out was horrifying. And actually, this happened in 2011 when a man dug up his courtyard in the French Quarter to put in a pool, only to unearth 15 coffins dating from the 18th century.
Wow.
Yeah. Secondly, custom mandated that burials be elevated and as above ground tombs or mausoleums. If strolling through the dead is not enough, the fact that generations upon generations can fit into one single crypt should be enough to send chills running up your spine. Yellow fever epidemics posed a deadly problem. However, if not for the span of one summer, thousands of victims could be seen waiting to be interred within the city's tomb space. And if you thought of the dead waiting to be buried doesn't unnerve you, the fact that voodoo queen Marie Lavel spirit still haunts St. Louis Cemetery Number 1 just might. Her ghost is said to lurk by her tomb. For visitors who disrespect her or her religion or beliefs, the ghost of Maria has been known to hit, scratch, and push people down to the ground. Maria Lavel might not be the friendliest of spirits, but she's just one of the ghosts rumored to haunt St. Louis Cemetery Number 1, the oldest grave site in New Orleans.
Hmm.
Number 4, and we spoke about this a little while ago, the Great Fires. Good Friday of 1788, Treasurer Jose Nunez was sitting in his family's home on Rue Chartres, less than a block away from St. Louis Church, now cathedral. He allegedly lit 56 candles in honor of the holiday, and then sat down for dinner with his family. Then, the scent of smoke curled through the house. The candles had caught fire upon the curtains. That night on March 21st, 1788, 856 of the 1,110 buildings in the French Quarter caught fire and burned to the ground. The Spanish governor, Esteban Miro, wrote, "If the imagination could describe what our senses enabled us to feel from sight and touch, reason itself would recoil in horror. It is no easy matter to say whether the sight of the entire city in flames was more horrible to behold than the suffering and pitiful condition in which everyone was involved." End quote. With nowhere to turn, locals camped out in Jackson Square, Plaza de Armas, which is just so happens to be the place where public executions were held every single week. Allegedly, those executions did not stop during the time the homeless New Orleans stayed there. And rumor has it that the stories of hearing disembodied voices screaming and spotting ghostly figures in Jackson Square started then. Today, Jackson Square remains just as paranormally active as it were when the Great Fire of 1788 ravaged the city, and the public executions amassed hundreds of New Orleans to watch each and every week. Orbs have been caught on camera in Jackson Square, and apparitions have been visibly spotted. So, New Orleans was a port town. It's no secret that port towns were often the most crime-ridden and violent-laden areas in a state. Portland, Oregon, for example, is known for its old town and the Shanghai tunnels, where unsuspecting folks were kidnapped out of saloons, dragged through the underground tunnels to the waterfront, and then sold to sea captains. Chad, this may have to be a topic for a future episode.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. New Orleans is no different. Back in the 1800s, the closest street to the waterfront was Gallatin Street, and it was known as the most dangerous street in the world. Legend has it that if you could make it past Gallatin Street, you could make it anywhere. Ramshackle buildings hung loose on their foundations. Gangs such as the Live Oak were so slick that their victims never knew their throats had been slashed until they were already dead on the ground. Prostitutes, some missing limbs or teeth, lured sailors off the street. Some of the most ruthless were women themselves. Bridget Fury, Jane Bricktop Johnson. These are the names of serial killers on Gallatin Street, and their souls, allegedly, have never left. At the stroke of midnight, a woman's scream can be heard still, just as a pistol shot rings out on the otherwise empty, quiet streets. Ultimately, Gallatin Street was razed to the ground at the end of the 19th century, but the imprint from that tumultuous period has remained. For many tourists, simply have no idea when they visit the French market in New Orleans, they are standing directly on where all of that death and crime once occurred. Number 6, there's a culture of death. Day of the Dead, Crew Debut Parade on Halloween, Crew d'Etat Parade during Mardi Gras, jazz funerals. These are just some of the ways that New Orleans celebrate the dead each year. Thanks to the heavy blend of Spanish, French, and African influence, death is not just an occurrence in New Orleans, it's also a cause for celebration. In a strange way, New Orleans are fascinated with the culture of death as a passage from here and now to the other side, and as weird as it may seem, locals in the city implants have found their way to celebrate those who have passed. Whether it's due to culture or just weird fascination, New Orleans encouraged the spirit of the dead to come out and play, making this party city and even playing field for both the living and the ghosts who still make the Crescent City their home, and who make New Orleans the most haunted city in America. So I love to discuss this, but let me cite some sources.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, ghostcitytours.com, a great website with a lot of captured information. FrenchQuarter.com, GardenandGun.com, NewOrleans.com, and History.com. So let's discuss.
Wow.
Man, there's so much history there, and it
Mm-hmm.
carries back so far. And New Orleans surprisingly is not a very big place. I mean, it is a big place, but it's not. It is expanded. But in the original sense, it's a sliver of land between the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. So
Right.
it's buffered north and south, and it just has it's a kind of a curving crescent of land. Hence, it's a crescent city. Uh, it's high ground, so it makes sense that people settled on it. And being it's 90 miles out of from the Gulf of Mexico, I'm still going to call it that, by the way. Um, it is a key strategic location.
Right.
It is and because it's at a curve of the river as well, it's got some strategery to it. I understand why it would have been contested through the years. And it's such a neat blend of culture too. And my experience there was a couple days. In the city itself, and mostly around the area. I stayed in Metairie, which is a suburb, but I've also been to Baton Rouge. I've been up to Shreveport, a few other smaller towns throughout the state. I've been around quite a good bit, and the whole Gulf culture is it's really
Right.
neat, and the French connection that it's there, the Creole connection that's there, the Caribbean connection that's there. And one thing we really didn't talk about in any of that stuff was voodoo, um,
Right.
because we already did an episode on voodoo, Chad.
You
It
say
was
that's a
back
whole
in season one,
episode.
episode 7. So I encourage those who are interested in voodoo to catch up to that. Um, well, we covered it a while back now. So, the blend of religion, the blend of various cultures, the I'll call it the riffraff, if you will, of
Uh,
the French prisons being released, for settlers. It's just such a fascinating thing. It all blended together and created this kind of dynamic place. So fascinating. And of course, with all of that energy comes the paranormal.
right.
So, have you ever been to New Orleans?
I have not as of yet.
Okay, not yet, right? I love the way you said that.
Um, so I just want to highlight some comments that came in while you were talking. Bert said that his great great grandfather was an Oddfellows member in Cleveland.
Ah, okay.
Got that connection there. And Todd Carmela's comment here sounds like there's a never ending list of these stories. Definitely need to make it to New Orleans sooner rather than later. So it sounds like, there's a whole bunch of us who need to get down there, Jamie. So I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
road trip is definitely in the works here. But yeah, I agree. Frankie also said another place I've never been, NOLA on the bucket list. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like it's one of those towns that there's just story after story after story after story, and you could probably go on for days with things that have happened there and not
Absolutely.
cover all of them. So,
And true. And that's a lot of things. There's a lot of things going on that aren't reported. And that's the interesting thing. Like, because there are people who don't believe what's happening.
right,
Is happening is paranormal or not. And we try to debunk stuff first, right? I
right,
think it's fair that we all should before we claim something to be paranormal or be a ghost or whatnot.
hmm,
So some folks probably have kind of just dismissed things, especially when it's been more or less playful.
hmm.
Nothing malicious anyway. Things just get moved, things turn on and off.
Well,
Old house, it's this, it's that.
like one
Okay.
of your first stories with the they went out partying and they came back and they had a shrine set up with the Halloween decorate. Like, Jamie, what would you do if you walked in and that had happened? Like,
Oh, I'd hope I went in first,
uh,
because if it was not me, I think we would have been moving out that night. Um, but you know, I don't think I would. I wouldn't be freaked out by it. I really wouldn't. And we both have lived in. We grew up in homes that have activity in it,
right,
like from younger ages on. So you learn to figure it out and you learn to live with it. It's my place with
right,
this.
yep,
And I think they, if I'm not mistaken, that story they also dove into who was there before them. They did the homework, the
right,
research, and they found who it was, and then one of the name thing, and then it's not the scary thing; it's a person, you know,
right,
and then you find your way to make it work for everybody, and
right,
I I grew up in a house that I absolutely love. And
hmm,
unfortunately, we sold it. My grandparents passed on, the house got sold, and it still stands today. I mean, it's certainly, it's not falling down or anything, but I love that house, and
right,
it's an old mansion kind of place down in the old town of Columbia, PA, an historic district. So it was just, this place was cool, and
hmm,
I can see myself, if I ever would pass, and whenever I pass, not if, but when, and we're all going to go someday. If there was a place, that would be my place. You know,
right,
I don't know that you get to choose that. I hope you do. And if so, and I go first, you'll find me there, Chad. So,
okay,
um,
yeah,
so I'll text you the address. But you know, I don't think there's a problem with that.
right,
Like I have more respect for it that way, for the person that way, because they love that place as much as I may love it as well, and they have the right to be there too.
right. Bert says, I think I would have to break the rule. Don't investigate your own home.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
it's true.
but I think the rule is don't investigate something you don't want the answer to.
That's really the truth of it. You're right.
So if you want to find the answer, then you do have to investigate it.
Yeah. Or
So
well, obviously we all know people, right? So we know each other. So someone else do it for you, and you step out for the evening, kind of thing.
right,
I don't think that's unusual. I mean, that was like, gazillion episodes of ghost hunters back in the day. All the
Right.
residents ones they did. They're helping a homeowner figure out what's going on in their house.
Right.
And we do private investigations for folks when they request it. So
Right.
if somebody has an issue that's happening, they don't know what's going on, they want to figure it out, they think it's paranormal.
Mhm.
So we can step in, and it's not a big deal that way because it brings some sense of understanding and maybe closure for that matter. But it brings the knowledge and understanding to that family or that person, whoever they are, of what really is going on. And sometimes it's not paranormal at all. Sometimes we have a great example of folks who are having lucid dreams and just some really bad nighttime experiences. Their headboard was right next to their electrical panel, which was kicking off a heck of a lot of EMF.
Right.
So, the
But
reality was they were just getting smacked with EMF all night while they were trying to rest, and it was
right.
it was, affecting them.
But they didn't realize it because if I remember correctly, it was on the other side of the wall, so it's not
Yeah,
like
there's a closet door, and it was right inside right inside the door, but at the panel was right at their headboard.
Mhm.
Um, so the conversation was, hey, move the furniture around if you can, and they could,
Right.
just see if you put the bed maybe away, and then checking in a little later, things were much much better. Other activity was still occurring, which was really the point of us being
Right.
there. But that part of their issue was resolved. And
Right.
again, not a paranormal thing, a very physical thing.
Mhm.
And not everybody's affected the same way by high levels of EMF as others, but they
Right.
were both sensitive to it and they were having issue.
Yeah.
So
And there's that question, it's sort of which came first, the chicken or the egg. Sometimes having that EMF leakage coming from that panel is enough to draw or give something energy
sure,
that's there. You
absolutely.
never know. So,
I don't argue that. And that's
um,
as far as the draw that it has, that's constant. It's
right.
always there. As long as the electricity's on, to the
Mhm.
building, it's there. So
Yeah. We ran into that in a place we investigated in New York, the Wildwood Sanatorium. There
okay.
was a hallway that a lot of people said, "Oh, we see things here all the time. We see here." Well, it turns out there was a high EMF reading right down the middle of that hallway where people cite things. So it's like, oh well, there's a good chance that it's a feeding energy. So I mean, it's basically doing what we do when we put out Tesla generators.
Great.
It's a
Definitely.
constant Tesla generator. So
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like a beacon at that point too. So,
mhm.
and I don't know, it's kind of like free Wi-Fi, right?
Right,
Pirating your neighbor's
right,
connection. Uh, you kind of you use it until it gets taken away from you.
yeah. So Bert's still saying we need to get the bus
Yeah, we do. We need a
for
bus.
the
You're right.
trip. So
It'd be a short bus for us, but still.
so
Well, I think New Orleans is one of those places that, and I give a lot of credit to the Ghost City Tours folks. They have done a lot of
mhm,
work, and documented a lot of it.
right,
And their website is fantastic for those who are interested in New Orleans or heading down there and interested on the paranormal. Check them out first, and you can do tours with them. They go out and
right,
they do investigations. Um, they have walking tours, of course, too, through the hot spots, and kind of like what we do at the brewery, where there's a ghost tour and then there's a paranormal investigation as another angle.
right,
If you just want to walk through it and see it all, kind of thing, you can
right.
certainly do that too. You know, New
And
Orleans is so very unique
mhm,
and such a really interesting place. It helps that it's in the Gulf states, so it's the climate's great all year long. Although I guess everybody had cold weather this year so far, but generally speaking, right now, we're talking at we
right,
are the first week of March, and it's in the 70s down there today.
right.
Gorgeous day. We go out and revel in the streets. We forget for Mardi Gras, but any
Yeah,
time of year, it's really a beautiful place.
Jamie,
Hot in the summer, but hot is relative.
I was gonna say I may at my age disagree with you about the climate's great all year round because I'm to the point that humidity just is not my friend. Like so,
Fair enough.
yeah. But anyway, so
Fair enough.
um,
I've had the pleasure of being in the Gulf states and the displeasure to some degree, the Gulf states for that same career path I was in then. I was always in the Gulf states in the summer months, and I was always in like the northern tier of the U.S. in the winter months. And I
yeah,
often thought, why are we not flipping the script and just reversing this?
right, exactly.
Gosh, it was. I mean, I remember being in like Port Huron, Michigan, in the middle of February, and it snowed every day, like inches of snow every day.
Mhm.
The first thing I had to do, we had storage pods. The first thing you had to do was go shovel everything out for like half an hour, and then you could
Uh-huh.
go do your work. And then it would snow in the afternoon and bury you again. It was like
Yeah,
never ending. Then you're in the Gulf states in the middle of summer, and everything you stick to everything because it's crazy sticky, humid.
right.
Um, but I'll take the warmth every day versus being cold. So
True.
that's the difference, I guess. But
So,
yeah, but climate, food. I can tell you one thing for sure, Chad. If you have the opportunity to have all you can eat crawfish,
do
think twice. Think twice. I know how many plates are too many. Um,
it.
uh, it's two. Two is too many. The third one is too many, I should say, but two is enough.
Well, and you have the other Cajun thing like alligator and
Mhm.
do you remember when the Cajun restaurant was it Columbia
Oh
Prudhomme
yeah, Prudhomme's.
Cajun
Yeah,
Kitchen?
Prudhomme's Cajun Kitchen, of course.
Wow, I used to love some of the Cajun food that they had. So,
Absolutely. And that's the thing. There is such a blending pot of cultures, which brings so much in for as far as food and
mhm,
resources. That way you don't have to have the same thing twice.
right,
And which is really cool. Because it's part of the uniqueness of New Orleans itself, and the Gulf states in general. I think that's a lot of it. The things you'll find there you won't find in anywhere else in the country, at least not as well made as it is there.
true,
Yeah, and again, I have a Southern grandmother, so some of that stuff gets pulled into Southern culture as well, but
right.
not enough of it to really appreciate as much as you will if you're there.
So, jambalaya, all those good things,
Yeah,
right?
Austin, the best gumbo I've ever had.
So, one thing that you hit on a little bit, I think, but I always find interesting is the number of cemeteries that are not burial grounds; they're above ground
Oh
cemeteries.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well, I
that again, that's because it's a necessity because you're below the floodplain.
yes,
So it's all mausoleums and even buildings that just have
yeah,
crypts in them.
mausoleums and crypts
And
essentially is the true. There is no interments. You're right,
right,
barrel in ground interments. And that's not a bad thing, in the sense of it, because it is still a way. We're talking about food, and Frankie just commented, "Now I'm hungry," and me too,
uh-huh,
by the way. So,
yeah,
although I did pick up this delicious bag of Zapp's Voodoo chips today, which I'm going to have some tonight when I'm done here. So I'm going to crunch in your ear. Um, but it's one of those things where it adds to the creepiness, because everybody is above ground.
right,
And it it's not to say it's a thing, but if something isn't properly maintained, you can have crypts open,
hmm,
seals go bad, things like that.
right,
Obviously, people can be grave robbers a lot easier than it would to dig someone out of the ground, and as a true traditional interment.
true,
So it wouldn't be unusual back in the day, at least, to see that a crypt was smashed, and a corpse was pulled out to take the things that they were buried with, as
right,
a grave robber or a thief.
yeah,
Much different today, of course. It doesn't happen nearly as much or at all. But there was a time in that era when there was a whole lot of criminality going on that
hmm,
would happen often.
yeah. But I think it'd be better to have that um, than digging the swimming pool and finding
Yeah,
unmarked
not
coffins.
cool. Not cool. This is, it makes me think of what's it, 811, as a call number where you
Oh,
dig, you call before you dig.
uh-huh.
I don't think anybody would know, what's in
True,
the
exactly.
backyard.
And what a great time for Jenny to jump in. We're
Hey,
talking
Jenny.
about coffins floating up to the surface.
Yeah,
So,
it's
but we're glad you could join us for a little bit, Jenny. So,
yeah. I had an old house I lived at. I had a flat stone in the very back corner of the yard that was
uh-huh,
always there, and I was going to redo the garden area that it was in. It was like around like a wall, a fence, and I was told that I wasn't allowed to move that stone. And I'm like, it's just a stone. It's like a step over because there was a
right.
breach in the gate at the end, or the fence at the end. So it was just a step to go across.
Hmm.
And it was truly believed that something was interred there. So I wasn't ever allowed to move that stone.
Right.
And it goes back to, like, what happens if you do. And the same thing, like if someone were to break into your crypt or your mausoleum, and steal your goods, from your corpse, wouldn't that be paused? for someone to say, "Hey, I'm gonna come and,
Yeah. So,
haunt you." I don't
yeah.
know. And the woman who said it, "I'm gonna come back and haunt those who wronged me,"
Hmm.
so you never know.
Yeah. So, yeah, definitely very, very well done, Jamie. Very interesting. Um, there's like we said earlier, you could go on and on and on and find more stories and
Well, even to get out of the city and you get into the bayous, like there's still a whole lot more to explore in all of the Gulf states for that matter.
right.
Once you get into the outlying areas away from the cities, there's tales of cryptids. There's all kinds of stuff that we'll have to explore another time, um, just to get into it. And just stuff. I mean, it keeps going. Like we say this all the time. There's no ends to this. There's no
Exactly.
walls to the paranormal here, and these kind of experiences are just part of it. So more to come.
Yeah, definitely. So,
Okay. Well, I've nothing more to add. Thanks.
okay.
Thanks for indulging me on this one.
Of course. Again, happy Fat Tuesday.
Happy
You
Fat
still have a
Tuesday.
couple hours to get out and get some Voss nuts, and somebody today at work was like, talking about them, and not from around here originally, was talking about the Foschnotz that they were definitely given a hard time about that. So,
Oh my.
so
Yeah. Well, it's a Dutchy thing. I get it.
yeah. So, but anyway, so let's talk about what's coming up for us. Um, do you want to say it, Jamie? Because I know you love this one. What's coming
Well,
next week?
next week we're going to jump into Leap Castle.
Yes, we are. So I'm going
Oh, I never
to
get told.
I'm going to talk about Ireland's most haunted castle, supposedly, purportedly. So we've got that to look forward to. Then Jamie's going to cover Tommy Knockers. I'm going to do the Dybbuk's box. Um, then on April 1st, I mean, I can't believe we're already talking about April Fool's Day. We got
Man.
paranormal hoaxes.
Yep.
And then, Jamie, we are traveling. We are doing a road trip.
We are.
A little over a month now. Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. I'll be covering the history the week before we go, or the Tuesday before we go, and then the 15th, also known as Tax Day. Uh,
Oh,
we'll
boo.
we'll be covering what happened at the asylum. So I'm really looking forward to that trip. So
Yeah, exactly.
so we've got that to look forward to. Let's see. Then, oop, jump
Too many
quickly.
buttons. Too many buttons.
March 22nd is our next investigation at the brewery. So plenty of tickets available for that one, but they usually start going quickly a couple weeks before. So get them while you can.
Yep, we're about 3 weeks out from that. So
Um,
it's time to plan.
yep. April 26th would be our next investigation there. Then May 17th, we have a special Para-Unity event with Land and Legends Paranormal. I know I saw that she was on earlier. Stacy Lee Smith will be joining us with Gary Smith, and they're a great team. Can't wait to work with them at Boobies and see what they come up with. It's going to be a fun event. I'm glad we're starting to do this a couple times a year. Bring another team in and work with them. So we'll see what we can come up with. And then June 21st would be the one in June. So that's
Yeah.
our investigations. You can head to Boobies Brewery, boobiesbrewery.com, BUBES brewery.com, / entertainment. And you can find everything that they've got going on, plus our investigations. So plenty to do at the brewery. So, as I said earlier, we've got Gary and Stacy Smith from Land and Legend on the 17th of May. Stacy does a podcast as well, so check that out. I'm drawing a blank on the name. I'm sorry, Stacy, but definitely jump on Facebook, look for her podcast. It's a good show. Check it out.
Yep. And if Stacey, if you're still with us, drop us a comment. We'll give you full credit for it and direct folks the right way.
Yep. Then, as we've been talking about the last couple of months, you can do private investigations at the brewery. It's a great way. You have the whole place to yourself. Once the restaurant closes, you get the hotel side. You get a lot of access, especially if you stay in the hotel upstairs. You can investigate those rooms. You get there's so much you can do. It's a great experience. If you want to book that experience, reach out to Melissa Keller. The email we're using currently, this is going to change soon, but it's mkeller0606@gmail.com. Reach out and she can get you all the information on the investigation, staying at the hotel, or staying across the street at the Malt Baron Mansion, which is a Airbnb. So plenty of opportunities there.
Yep. And Chad,
Uh-huh.
what happens when you what with staying over?
Mount Joy's always better when you sleep over. More fun when you sleep over.
It's both. It's both. It's better and it's more fun.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So, and then our social media. You found us tonight on Facebook, the Jott-Nyx Paranormal Facebook page, or the Jott-Nyx Paranormal YouTube page. But check out our TikTok, Instagram. Paranormal Lens now has a Facebook page. Check that out. Just the easiest way to find that is go on Facebook and search Paranormal Lens, because there's a weird ID number now because they're changing how Facebook works. Imagine that.
Yeah.
If you want to reach out to us at paranormallenspodcast@gmail.com, drop us a line, tell us how we're doing, give us show ideas, tell us what we need to work on, any of that. We don't mind. We love hearing information. We love hearing feedback. And if you weren't aware, everything that we've done for the past 2 years is available on Spotify. Again, the easiest way to do that is jump on Spotify and search Paranormal Lens. It'll come up. We're also on Apple Podcast, iHeart Podcasts, Audible, all the places. And you can also check out Linktree Paranormal Lens, and that will consolidate all these links in one place.
Yep.
So
One-stop shopping.
Yep. So, Jamie, any last minute thoughts?
I don't. I'm gonna go find me some vignettes and some voodoo chips and
Uh-huh.
get all this stuff out of my house before Fat Tuesday is over, and then we'll go from there.
You're
So
gonna go dump the lard so you can get it out of the house and start fresh after Lent's over.
there is no lard in my house. It says no. Just ew. No.
So, all right,
That did not carry forward from my grandmother. So
all
no,
right,
no.
okay. Well, we want to thank everybody who's stuck with us and everybody who's checking us out on all the podcasts in the future. So, thank you,
Yeah.
Jamie.
We'll look forward to see everybody next week for Leap Castle.
We're gonna jump right into that.
There it is.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Take care. Good night.